Hello, everyone. Looking at a very famous essay by an American anthropologist, not a philosopher, really, Ruth Benedict, but a very important anthropologist. This is from a volume from the 1930s called Patterns of Culture, and the particular essay this is excerpted from is called Anthropology and the Abnormal, which is a very influential piece that Benedict wrote in the 1930s, I believe. And she has a certain thesis um, about culture and cultural practices in general, with all sorts of implications for moral or ethical practices in particular. I don't think that in a brief, suggestive essay like this, we can hold her to the strictest standards of argumentation. She has a very suggestive thesis. What is that thesis, and what does she say in support of that thesis? In the first page here, this is on the second column of the first page. She's trying to sort of, I think, give a general sense of where she's going. And it's about right here where she says, in the higher cultures, the standardization of custom and belief over a couple of continents has given a false sense of the inevitability of the particular forms that have gained currency. And we need to turn to a wider survey in order to check the conclusions we hastily base upon this near universality of familiar customs. As if to say, what she means by the higher cultures, she really means European American, North American cultures, as opposed to what? As opposed to simpler forms of human life, like the one she mentions from the Native Americans of the Pacific Northwest, the Kwakiutl, that we have a false sense of the inevitability of our customs. We do things a certain way here, let's say in America, modern American civilization. And we have certain standard beliefs and values we should not, she says, assume just because they're so widespread, because our culture is so dominant in so many ways. Our Western culture, she says, we shouldn't assume that these are simply the way things are. As she continues, she says, most of the simpler cultures that did not gain the wide currency of the one which, out of our experience, we identify with human nature. But this was for various historical reasons. I think what she's saying is that European culture, Western culture, in a sense, won the battle, as opposed to the cultures of Native Americans, the cultures of isolated people living in hunter-gatherer ways, different parts of the world. That their cultures didn't become as widespread as ours, but they're no less valid, and they give us perspective on the, let's face it, the contingency and relativity of our own customs. She wants to focus on the normal abnormal category. Right? She says at the bottom of this, she says one of the problems relates to the customary modern normal abnormal categories. And what she wants to say is that the concepts of normality are always culturally relative. That is, what is normal in one culture would be abnormal in another culture, and vice versa. And she gives various examples of that. Uh, she gives some very interesting examples. Remember, this is written in the 1930s, so American attitudes towards homosexuality were quite different. And one of the things she says is homosexuality is an accepted part of many cultures around the world. It's not viewed as any kind of deviance. It shows you that in the 1930s in America, being gay was still quite you were still viewed as an outsider or deviant or sick or something. And what she's saying is that homosexuality, whether it's regarded as normal or abnormal, is really culturally relative. It's really a matter of where you are and when. And other things that we might consider abnormal, like, say, paranoid behavior. She says here, I believe it's this on this second column of the second page, where she says that in some cultures, what we would regard as paranoia, just extreme suspicion, is just the way that they think, man. And somebody who's trusting would be viewed as abnormal. So she gives various examples of that, where she's really, again, focusing on the categories of normal and abnormal, and arguing that they differ very widely from place to place. And so there's no universal category of normality that we could possibly rely on. And I think her most challenging, then, I think, morally speaking, because this does morph into certain claims about morality, not just normality, but morality. Her most challenging example is here when she starts talking about the Kwakiutl, who, if I remember rightly, are Pacific Northwest people, and the way that they respond when somebody dies, or somebody is killed in their, or just somebody is just dies of an accident or something in their community. What she's claiming is that they go out and kill somebody else fairly at random, and this is not seen as odd. It's not revenge. The person or the people that they kill, they are not in any way seen as responsible for the death of the member of their community. They just need to kill somebody to sort of put things back in balance. Basically, a random killing in response to what they regard as the tragedy of their own losing their own community member or family member. I would say that that's the most challenging example that she gives. And clearly, she doesn't want to stop with categories of normality. She wants to go to categories of morality. And she hasn't, in the last couple of pages here, she has some very interesting things to say about that. Uh, she summarizes the implications of the examples that she's been given uh, by saying here these illustrations, which it has been possible to indicate only in the briefest manner, force upon us the fact that normality is culturally defined. That is what we regard as normal. But then we see that she's perfectly comfortable with saying, in addition to that, not only that normality is culturally defined, but that morality, what is what anything we would say about what is good and evil, right and wrong, is also culturally defined. Um, and that is, let's say, right here, the bottom of this column here on the page, it says, it is a point that has been made more often in relation to ethics, which is our territory, right, than in relation to psychiatry. We do not any longer make the mistake of deriving the morality of our locality and decade directly from the inevitable constitution of human nature. That is, we no longer feel that our current morality, our current beliefs about what's right and wrong are just based on human nature itself. We recognize that our moral beliefs are historically conditioned. She continues and says, we do not elevate it to the dignity of a first principle. We recognize that morality differs in every society and is a convenient term for socially approved habits, which is a radical thesis. I'd like you to let that sink in. I'm not saying she's right, I'm not saying she's wrong, but I want you to register how radical that statement is. Let's repeat it. Um, she says, we recognize that morality differs in every society and is a convenient term for socially approved habits. That is, morality is nothing more than socially approved habits, what the society happens to approve of at any given moment. That's all morality is. That is a radical relativist statement about the nature of morality. She could be quite right. She could be wrong. I don't know. But you should register just how sweeping and radical a statement that is. Um, yeah, and just to finish up, in the last column here at the end of the reading, it's pretty amazing what she says. Let me read it in its entirety just to sort of get it across because I think it's worth emphasizing. She says, I have spoken of individuals as having sets towards certain types of behavior, and of these sets as running sometimes counter to the types of behavior which are institutionalized in the culture to which they belong. That would be people who are considered deviants or abnormals. From all that we know of contrasting cultures, it seems clear that differences of temperament occur in every society. That is, people are born with different types of character and personality, temperament. The matter has never been made the subject of investigation, but from the available material it would appear that these temperament types are very likely of universal recurrence. People who are gay, people who are straight, people who are optimistic and sunny, people who are gloomy and pessimistic. These temperaments or temperamental things are will pop up everywhere. That is, there is an ascertainable range of human behavior that is found wherever a sufficiently large series of individuals is observed. But the proportion in which behavior types stand to one another in different societies is not universal. The vast majority of individuals in any group are shaped to the fashion of that culture. That is, you and I and everyone else, we in our behavior, our temperament, our personality, our beliefs have been shaped by the dominant attitudes of our culture. In other words, most individuals are plastic. To be plastic is to be shapeable, to be moldable. Most individuals are plastic to the molding force of the society into which they are born. It's just the way it is. In a society that values trans, as in India, they will have supernormal experience. In a society that institutionalizes homosexuality, they will be homosexual. In a society that sets the gathering of possessions as the chief human objective, they will amass property. So basically saying that our attitudes, our practices, even our sexuality, and definitely our morality, most of us are just, we take on the orthodox conformist shape that society offers. We're moldable. The deviants, whatever the type of behavior the culture has institutionalized, will remain few in number. And there seems no more difficulty in molding the vast malleable majority to the normality, scare quotes, of what we consider an aberrant trait. That is, if you and I were thrown in as babies into a culture that valued paranoid, violent behavior, we would most likely just conform to be paranoid and violent. If we were born into a culture that valued peace and love, and we would be peaceful and loving. If you see what we're just infinitely variable, we can conform, adapt to anything. The small proportion of the number of the deviants in any culture is not a function of the sure instinct with which a society has built itself upon the fundamental sanities, but of the universal fact that, happily, the majority of mankind quite readily take any shape that is presented to them. Again, a very radical thesis that if we apply this to morality and ethics are totally up in the air. They can pretty much be anything, because human nature is able to adapt to anything and take on just about any belief. Definitely a radical, culturally relative position, and one which is really very challenging.